as I say, this is our final panel of the weekend, and we figured when better than to use this time, what better to do than to use this time to reflect on how we are doing. And this is really going to be a conversation about kind of the effectiveness of what we've been doing. And for that reason, I've assembled an international panel to help us get to grips with the question of are we as skeptics winning. So please join me in saying Bom dia, Dobry den, and howdy, I guess, to our panel who are going to introduce themselves starting at the end there.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Diana Barbosa. I'm from Portugal, and I suppose I'm here representing COMCEP, the Portuguese skeptics community. I was trained as a biologist, but now I work professionally as a science communicator at a History Research Institute. So I cross the culture bridge.
I'm Noah Lugeons. I do a bunch of podcasts, mostly making poop jokes about Kevin Sorbo movies. And I am not watching the Jaguars game on my phone. You are. I don't even know that they're up 7-0 in the first quarter.
You know, the question, are we winning, was not about the football, right?
We are winning.
Oh, we are winning.
Okay, all right, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. At football, I had no idea what sport you're talking about.
American football, so not even football.
Oh, okay, good. So my name is Claire Klingenberg. I'm the president of the European Council of Skeptical Organizations, which is a group, which is an umbrella group which tries to unite and facilitate communications among groups in Europe that concern themselves with skepticism, science communication, and critical thinking promotion.
And I'm, as well as host the panel, I'm Michael Marshall. I'm the project director of the Good Thinking Society, a full-time skeptical investigator and activist, and I do stuff to try and stop pseudoscience harming people here in the UK. So that's my perspective on things. That felt a little bit like fishing for a round of applause there, uncomfortably so. So, are we winning is the framing of this conversation. It's a big question. It's probably not one with a binary answer. So we're better off kind of breaking it down a bit. And I'll be breaking it down to sort of three chunks, really. What have we been doing right over the last few years? What out there have we missed? And what's coming that we should be aware of? So be thinking about those questions. I'll come to you in three different segments with audience questions. So let's start with the case for the positive. And we'll start with Diana first. When it comes to countering pseudoscience, what do you see as some of the successes in skepticism, either at a local level in Portugal or more broadly than that?
So I'll start local, and I want to tell you that we are a very small organization, and so the last 5 years had the roller coaster of COVID, and we were full-on caught on it, and our activities were very much destabilized by it. But being a very small organization with a small number of volunteers working on it, previous to the pandemic, I think we had some wins, at least in awareness. We were able to publish a book, which was quite well received, and it was placed on the national reading recommended books for schools, so for adolescents and adults. And through that, we were able to get connections to schools and go to schools and do critical thinking sessions with students, which I think it's truly, truly very important. And in 2019, just before the pandemic, we had two campaigns, one national and one international, that I believe Claire also participated in. The national one was a manifesto that we promoted related to science-based healthcare. So we gathered a bunch of doctors and scientists, and we wrote an open letter to Parliament, because the laws in Portugal are very permissive towards what they called I'm sorry, I'm not native. Non-conventional therapies. And we want to try to change that. But it's quite hard because it all comes down from a European directive. So starting in Portugal, we did this manifesto. The manifesto brought a big television debate on the national broadcaster. And that was a a big national debate that I believe we lost, at least in terms of audience. I was there. It was a very aggressive environment. It was not a pleasant experience, but at least it was on the public sphere and the public attention. And then the European campaign was not started by us. It was started by a Spanish organization that was formed by the father of a young man that died of cancer because he abandoned his treatment in order to do alternative treatments. So it's an organization that tries to protect patients from pseudoscience. And they contacted us and a bunch of other European organizations, and we did this European manifesto against pseudoscience in health. And we were able to gather 2,750 signatures from academics and healthcare professionals from 44 different countries. So in the end, it went over also away from Europe. And it was published in 2020 when we were already full on into the pandemic. So the impact wasn't as great as we were expecting. So these are small steps and small wins and losses that I was reflecting these last few days that I could talk to you about. Some good things. I believe there is a better awareness that the pandemic brought us a better awareness to non-skeptics or non-science communicators about the dangers of pseudotherapies, about the dangers of anti-vaxxing, about the dangers of conspiracy theories, at least people that weren't thinking about it as a danger. They now can see it that it is a danger because they saw live on their lifetimes the effects that these groups and these types of ideas can bring to society. It also brought those people promoting pseudoscience and conspiracy theories to a stage that they didn't deserve. But the awareness is greater. Something positive from these last few years, it's also that, at least in Portugal, there are scientists every day on television doing interviews. That is something very positive. They don't all agree with each other, so we are navigating a very narrow field of there are scientists communicating directly to the public, but the public is also watching live scientists disagree with each other, which is something absolutely normal, but sometimes can be misconstrued and misinterpreted. And getting out of Portugal, I think we have a win with Alex Jones, but I suppose Noah will talk about it, and the whole work that the Good Thinking did with homeopathy here in the UK. It's amazing. It'll be very hard to do something like that in Portugal at the moment because of the way the legislation is set up.
Yeah,
because it was transposed from a European directive, so we are supposed to have it, but not all European countries have it. Spain doesn't have it.
And speaking of that, it's probably a good time for me to bring to Claire in as the president of the European Council of Skeptical Organisations. You must get a lot of updates on skeptical wins, things that are progressing. Is there anything you want to sort of share as being the highlights in your mind?
Sure. So I think a really good job was done by the Dutch Skeptic Society, which wrote a really intense article on the lobbying organization Eurocam, which is the European lobbying organization for complementary and alternative medicine, which has been gaining traction even before the pandemic, and now with the pandemic has done a lot of lobbying work to when it comes to various health councils to push the legitimacy and legitimizing of alternative therapies. Another thing that I think that we've noticed all around the world within the skeptic movement is that we've kind of got rid of people who weren't really into doing the work. And but we got so many people who wanted to actually do some change and work on their community and learn how to connect with people with different opinions and how to kind of try to keep on dialogue. So I think that, to me, is the biggest win.
Yeah. And Noah, I know you'll be itching to explain to us how bad things are going, but if I can try and turn you towards the light for a little bit, I promise we'll get to the bad stuff. Could you tell me what you say you've seen over the last 5 or so years, something in that kind of area that represents progress, positive impact on what we're doing?
Yeah, it might seem a weird thing to say given the sort of the growth and power of the anti-vax movement over the last few years, but I think the work we've done on vaccine denialism has saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives over the last couple of years. Just anecdotally, I have been involved in a protracted fight with my septuagenarian mother to get her damn flu vaccine once a year. And as my Facebook friends can attest, it has been quite a fight. But I eventually convinced her about 2-3 years ago to start getting that annually. She was convinced, that it was going to give her the flu or that it was going to give her autism or whatever, whatever nonsense she had encountered. And so when the COVID crisis came around, she was already, we didn't have to have that fight again. And I don't know how many times you can multiply that out, but I think, it probably saved quite a few lives. The fact that we had put all the infrastructure in place, the fact that when people went online, they found such great resources to counter the specific points that anti-vaxxers make. I think we've done really well on that.
I certainly think the visibility of science over the pandemic has been certainly a boon. And I also think, from my perspective, I think we've seen a sort of shift away from some of the classic fights in skepticism, some of the fights against pseudoscience. Evolution denial has really kind of dropped off. There's not as many people out there as there used to be. In the UK, there are far fewer big touring psychics taking up space in the biggest theatres in cities. There are forms of alternative medicine that are much harder to get, and much harder to get on the NHS these days than they used to be. And I think those are positive. Although I'm not sure it's always easy to claim direct credit. You can't point to one thing skeptics have done and say, yeah, that's the reason that Psychic Sally's no longer in that.
We absolutely can.
Well, let's do that. Let's do that too. But I think there's been a cultural shift away from some forms of pseudoscience, and I think part of that is the presence of skepticism in those areas has made it untenable to continue pushing things that don't make sense because people have got access and exposed to counter arguments that are persuasive and counter rhetoric and stuff. And skeptics, they've got to my next question here. So just so this isn't me extending a rant. This is the next question. We've moved on. The skeptics have long since noticed how some beliefs kind of go in and out of fashion. Randy talked about the unsinkable rubber ducks. There's ideas that we thought were dead and buried that have come back to prominence. We're seeing astrology and crystal therapy rising on TikTok. I thought that was gone. I didn't think the next generation would be picking up astrology and stuff. Do you think that is part of a natural flaw, or do you think it's kind of that it would be even more so the case that those things were believed and weren't going away if skeptics weren't out there skepticking? Is it evidence of effectiveness of our movement that they disappear for a while, and it's only once we stop focusing on them that they start to come back? And for anyone on the panel who wants to pick that up.
Yeah, I have a wonderful answer. So I'm going to take you back to the year 1502. The reason is that in that year, there was a painting painted The Conjurer by Hieronymus Bosch. And in that painting, we see a man playing the 3-card Monte, the shell game, with a group of spectators. And since then, and already before that, everyone has known that this game, you can never win that, and it's a huge scam. And we've noticed that it has come back because the generation of our parents who grew up with that game during the communist times, they know not to touch that. But young people, we did an experiment on the street. They will just come and play, and they just don't understand that, no, this is a scam. So we did give them their money back, and we did explain to the police that we are doing it as part of filming, so it's okay. But however, we've seen that kind of in the alternative medicine movement as well, and all kind of other when it comes to there are these kinds of beliefs that we kind of, the one generation forgets and the next generation discovers. And that's why there's a kind of a cyclical thing, but we have a huge advantage now that all of the information is already out there. It's digitalized, and we can just go and find it. It's not that we have to go and redo everything again and again. It's already ready.
Anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just, I think it is cyclical, but I think, as you said, that's evidence that we're doing something right. I think, look, if you look at it historically, if you go back to the 1500s and what the pseudoscience calcified into religion at that point. It became intractable. I think the fact that pseudoscience is cyclical is evidence that we're both effective and understaffed. Sorry to be positive 2 answers in a row.
I'm sure you'll break that spell. Don't worry about it. And Diana, have you any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is an ebb and flow of of topics that, well, UFOs or UAPs are now a big thing again, although skeptical organizations were mostly founded around that sort of topics, and everyone was talking about it, and apparently it was solved, and now all of a sudden it's out there again, everyone talking about it. But that doesn't mean that we are not doing something to counter it. The skeptical movements, I believe, also have a role in anticipating some of those up-and-coming subjects. And in our experience, we had that with chemtrails. The first time I heard about it, it was João, my partner, that read about it, and he was like, this is stupid. No one's going to believe this. Are you sure you want to write about this for our website?
Yeah.
And we were filled with comments and attacks and people calling us all sorts of names, including Illuminati and variations such of. So it was something that was really fringe. I don't believe that we gave it a spot, but we did raise awareness about it. And when they came out and did very small demonstrations, at least newspapers and the media, they already had an idea about what that was about. So there's a role in that also with our skeptical activism.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was going to take a question on the positive side, but I think what I'll do is I'll move into the other side and then we'll take questions after that section. So let's look at the flip side. Looking back over, say, the last 5 years, 10 years, something in that kind of the recent kind of time period, where, if anywhere, do you think that we've failed to make a dent on pseudoscience or failed to arrest a slide in those kind of places? For anybody who wants to be negative.
Okay, so I'll start.
I'll warm up.
Yeah, you'll
you see
warm
Claire,
up.
you think, oh, that's a
Okay.
very negative person, Claire.
So I think generally, well, it's not just the 5-10 years, but generally we have overlooked our own biases a lot when it comes to dealing. We've kind of put science up on a pedestal, and we kind of forgot the role of sexism in science, the role of racism in science, and other ways and other biases that have influenced a lot of the discoveries that we kind of were building on. And we failed to address that until recently, when these anti-white supremacy movements and anti-feminist movements have become so much more prominent, where we were forced to look at ourselves. So we should have done a much, much better job on getting there much earlier and being able to look at ourselves and our shortcomings.
Absolutely.
Yep, I'm going with the same thoughts that Claire is raising. We were a bit blind about our allies, or the typical allies of skepticism, atheist groups, rationalist groups, and it was festering on those groups these sorts of things like anti-trans sexual ideas, sexism, racism, all the stuff about critical race theory was thought of as something that's not important, and it is truly important, and we need to embrace it and we need to engage with it. And that was a blind side of ours, and so that was a negative. Another negative that
She has a whole list prepared.
No, I don't. Just random notes. Another negative for us, I think, is that we. I have a quote here. I don't know if it's truly correct. I may be misquoting a little bit, but it is a quote from Tom Curry from Cognitive Dissonance. Just last week, he said, "Stop irony watching monsters." And he was talking about Alex Jones.
He said that, but much gruffer. Like
Yeah.
lower, gruffer,
Yeah.
angry. Yeah.
Not with my voice, with a very nicer voice that he has, very radio
Eli?
voice.
He does a pretty good job.
And that's this stop irony watching monsters. That's something that sometimes we are guilty of. We give them stage. We talk about them, and we sometimes we do it with a good purpose to call attention to a problem, but many times we let it slip by that our relatives, our friends are watching these people, reading these people, and we discard it as fringe, and we cannot do that because it was fringe when it started, but now it is not, and and these sort of very fringe people are then a gateway to all sorts of conspiracy theories and conspiracy ideas and anti-medicine ideas and the whole shebang. And we need to be more attentive and not discard it as it's fringe, it's just a crazy person, but be more engaged with people around us that are getting into that.
Yeah, I think that the idea of irony watching monsters, I think Aaron Rabinowitz, who may be in the audience, described it as epistemic
yes.
poverty tourism, in that it's the same kind of thing of like taking a look around the slums from the luxury of your own
Yes.
vehicle kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I think it's called poverty porn.
Yes, yeah. But it's that for beliefs. Noah, do you have anything you want to come in with?
No, really, just to echo the points that Claire was making about our inability to see our own biases. Although I will say I was thinking about this as we were walking through. We had a layover at the Atlanta airport, and I did walk by 2 chiropractic clinics in the airport. Just little pop-ups that they had there. So like that might be an area where we could have done better over the last 5 years as well.
Okay. Airport chiropractors.
I think for me, it feels like, in my eyes, the defining pseudoscience of this age of skepticism is conspiracy theory, in a way that in previous years we've had paranormal skeptics was kind of the main thing, and then alternative medicine. These days it feels like conspiracy theory. And I remember I came across the flat Earth idea in like 2013, and then researched and spent time in the flat Earth community in like 2017, 2018. And I was saying at the time that these aren't just people who think the world is flat, they believe all sorts of other stuff, and they're just waiting to be radicalized on the next bad idea. And I don't know that we did enough to arrest that slide in particular, the slide from one bad idea into another. We maybe did a reasonable job at countering the specifics of what they believed at the time, but we didn't get to grips with the underlying factors that led them into that hole and led them into the next hole, and before you knew it, the Nazis are back, kind of thing. Yeah. And so, how about I take a question from the audience now? So there's a hand up over there. We're going to start over here, and then we'll try and bridge the divide in a moment. But you had your hand up, did you? We'll give it to you there. Talk directly into the round black bit at the top.
Going off what Claire said about the digitization of knowledge and the accessibility of it to much wider swaths of the population than before, do skeptical communities have an advantage in that the actual science and debunking information is already available for many subjects, or is the flip side of that a bigger disadvantage in that fringe and pseudoscience is also more available? I.e., are we winning?
Yeah. Who wants to jump in on that?
Yes and no.
Okay, next answer. No.
She's taking all the answers. This isn't fair.
There's maybe. You've got maybe out there.
No, we get asked that a lot in every public event that we do or interview. People ask, "Oh, how about social networks? That's awful." Like, we met each other on Facebook.
Yeah.
Our organization wouldn't exist if it wasn't for social networks and blogs. There were a thing called blogs where people would go and comment, and we met each other also on comment boards. And so it's a yes and no question. It's a tool for us. It's a tool for us without financial resources to try and spread the word, but it's also a tool for them. And it's a place where people that were randomly scattered about their countries, their cities, their places, to meet also and to create community also. So the same way we created the Portuguese skeptical community, meeting online, most of us, the flat earther communities and the conspiracy communities and all of them are also meeting and growing online. Now, there is a difference in the last 10 years on how social networks are functioning and the reach that they have. And that is a whole other problem because the way the algorithms work, everything changed. So it's not the same innocent type of environment that we had in 2010, 2012 when we started doing this type of work. But another thing that it also exposes us if we are looking for fringe ideas, it also exposes us a lot more to those fringe ideas, which can be sometimes anxiety inducing and very stressful. So yes and no.
Yeah.
So just to explain my point, I meant it's that it's easier for us skeptics to do our work because we already have the work of other skeptics behind us. Of course, see, there is a problem that you've mentioned, but I meant it more in that we already have a database for us that we can work off of.
Yeah, the tools are already there. We just have to pick them up and use them now.
Yeah, I can say from my personal experience, when I was, I'm old enough that I grew up pre-internet, and I grew up down south. I grew up in the Bible Belt. And when I became interested in atheism, when I became skeptical of the Christian worldview, my options were to go to bookstores. All the bookstores in my area were Christian bookstores. They had said it in the name. It would be so-and-so's Christian bookstore, and they would not order a book from you if it seemed critical of religion. There was no other way to get those books at the time. I was never at a loss to find conspiracy theories at that time. So I think overall it's probably a net good.
Yeah. I think I'd agree. Although I do think that when people go looking for answers, the right answers are just one option of the many, many options for answers they get, and it's not always necessarily going to be the most persuasive option because the right answer isn't always sexy. It isn't always shocking. It doesn't always involve kind of the secret knowledge that no one else has, and it doesn't always give you the satisfying solution to why you're in this problem. So just having a plethora of answers available doesn't necessarily mean people are likely to choose the best one. Who has the box now? You don't have the box. Oh, you've moved it over there. Fantastic. Who has a hand up for a question after this one? I want to go over that. Absolutely not. That's cheating. No chance. So
but it's too close.
when you ask your question, once you've asked it, pass the box over and we'll get it to the chap who sat right there. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. My question is, what can we do to combat people, particularly like conspiracy theorists, who try and co-opt the skeptic and critical thinker name?
Okay, nice.
You read my notes, didn't you?
Say a little turf war.
Who wants to come in on that? If it's in your notes, Claire, feel free to jump on in.
So one of the questions Marsh sent us was, what are the big challenges that we're facing? And I wrote down reclaiming the name skeptic. So I think we just have to keep on using it and keep on explaining that skeptic and denier means very different things. When you see a newspaper incorrectly use climate skeptic, just let them know. Write that to the editor, to the writer. It doesn't matter that he might not respond, but if there's enough people doing it enough times, we're going to eventually get that done. My friend has a really good quote. Perseverance is really just hanging on for 1 second longer than the other guy. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Anyone else got thoughts on that? Or?
Well, actually, I think it could be a very good thing for us ultimately, because if we were there first, and in a sense that gives us an advantage online. So if they start using the term skeptic and then people are like, well, I'm a skeptic too, let me Google more stuff about skepticism, we might just be able to pick a few off because of that. So it might be, as long as we can maintain sort of a dominance online about it, might be a good thing for us.
That's a question that we also have to answer every time we try to present what we do. The word in Portugal is not as well understood as it is in the Anglo-Saxon world, in the English-speaking world. So we try to always use it as scientific skepticism and to explain that it's different from the philosophical skepticism. It's a practical movement around basing our ideas, our conclusions on science and using it in our everyday lives. So I try to explain what it is, what's a skeptic, what's a skeptical organization, and why we are not denialists or cynics, and the difference between scientific skepticism and denialism. So it's a constant conversation that we have with people that we know and with audiences that we don't know.
Yeah, and it seems interesting because I think it's another one of those things that has been either cyclical or kind of like peaks and troughs, because I think when I first got involved in sort of skepticism in 2009, no one really, a lot of people I met would have no idea what you meant by skeptic, and that seemed to change. And then, I don't know whether there was like a resurgence of climate change denialism or something like that, but then people started associating skeptic with that, and then that seemed to change and sort of drop away again. And then the pandemic hits, and we have a lot of anti-vaxxers, and now people are thinking, oh, skeptic, you must be against vaccines and things.
Oh,
so
we get that a lot.
Yeah, so it depends what's in the cultural zeitgeist at the time.
A bunch of emails from journalists expecting us to be skeptical of vaccines and being anti-vaccines, and then we explain, no, we are scientific skeptics. We fully support vaccines. And then they don't want to talk with us. Because they want to talk with the other side.
This happened with my manicurist too.
I get some very confused audiences because my current talk that I'm doing in various skeptics in the pub groups is about the anti-vaccination movement, and it's like Michael Marshall's the editor of the Skeptic magazine. He's going to be talking about the anti-vaccination movement. I get some very confused people turning up when they don't hear me shouting about like Klaus Schwab and the Illuminati, and they just hear someone debunking and explaining what's kind of going on. And we have your question, then we'll come back to some of my questions.
If you had to choose between focusing on changing legislation and governance or getting the message out and PR, which would you choose?
Government.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I think you can get more done quicker.
If we had the financial resources, it would be government. Since we don't, we try to focus on PR and lay audiences and promote events that are as open as possible. 99% of the time they are free to attend, so try not to create any barriers for people to come and talk with us, because we don't have the funding to do a proper legislative approach to the subject, except doing open letters and writing manifestos and try to do our lobby personally, but not without big advocacy firms or lobby groups.
I mean, I'm going to use my right as chair to reject the premise of the question, which is that I think it's really important that we don't have to choose. There's lots of us, and we should be doing the thing that we are most effective or most interested in being effective at, because I think we absolutely should be tackling this at a legislation kind of level, and that's kind of the work that I do with Good Thinking, is looking at things like what contract decisions are the NHS making and how do we challenge that. But I think we have to be doing the PR stuff as well, because otherwise we're not going to reach people in the same way. We may stop them being harmed, but they're not going to ever know they were stopped from being harmed, which means they might walk past the homeopath, which is shut down, and walk straight into the chiropractor's office, which is next door. So we have to be doing both at the same time. And it also means that the skill sets that we have, if your skill sets aren't tailored to the legislative regulation stuff, which can be super fucking boring because it's the absolute kind of weeds and notes of it. If your skill sets are tailored to other stuff, do the other stuff and push in the same direction, push everything in the right direction, really. So I'm rejecting your question, and that's why I'm going back to my own questions. These are better. So we've looked at the good, we looked at the bad. What do you think we just completely missed? Like, it was just stuff that wasn't on our radar. It's grown to become a serious battleground now that we're suddenly fighting. But like, we should have seen this coming, and we just are suddenly in the middle of something that requires our work, but we just didn't have it at all in our mind a few years ago.
I think you already hit on it. I think it's weird to say because it's kind of where the whole thing began, but it's the conspiracy theories. It's the the old school 1990s Illuminati are controlling everything conspiracy theories. I think we thought that we'd more or less put that to bed, and they came back and they gave us Brexit and Trump, for fuck's sake. I mean, they've been real bad.
Yeah.
So I misunderstood the question. I thought it was about what we have really never addressed as a skeptic movement.
Okay.
And it took me a really long time, and then it was actually quite obvious, and that we've never actually skeptically analyzed pandemic plans before 2020.
Yeah.
That has never been a topic ever at any conference or
Yeah,
That's
I realise I set a precedent
one.
for ignoring questions, and sorry, Tana.
Now, going with what Noah was saying, the Trump and Brexit not only brought it back, but brought it back with revenge.
Right.
So it's self-fulfilling and retrofitting itself. and creating this huge wave that it's overwhelming us. I feel one thing that related to the previous question and that I think we missed and now it's among us is the whole gender critical movements.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem, and we ourselves haven't addressed it yet. I'm looking for a good way, an effective way to address it, because I started seeing it here in Britain, then in the US, and now I'm seeing it in Portugal, because everything will reach there
Eventually, right?
Eventually.
Yeah.
And I started talking about it with friends and colleagues, and I'm like, no, that's a British thing. It's getting there. We are already there, and we need to address it. And that happened with us when we began the organization. We focused a lot on anti-vaccine movements, and many people, even allies, were like, why do you speak about this? This is not a problem in Portugal. We have a 99% vaccination rate. We don't have that problem here. And then we had a measles outbreak, and then COVID came, and all the For Truth movements, very small but very loud, came out into the open. So the seed was there, and unfortunately, it was brought from Northern Europe into Portugal. In my immigrant communities, expats, as you like to say, from Britain, from France, from Germany. And in the places, we can see it geographically, the regions of the country where there are more people coming from those countries is the places where we have, in the health centers, more difficulties vaccinating children, because we are importing those ideas. And when we started in 2012, people were like, don't talk about it. It's not a problem here. Well, it wasn't apparently, but it was, and it is. So we need to be ahead of the curve. And
Yeah, that's the thing. There's no such thing as a British thing or an American thing, because everything spreads eventually. Our huge advantage that we have in Europe is that we see what the British and Americans are dealing with, and we can, get ready.
It's good to know we're still pioneers.
Yeah,
right?
you are welcome. Yeah. I think I want to pick up on what Diana was saying, because I think you're absolutely right. We're seeing things come back. I mean, for me, the stuff we missed was like, I didn't think that the satanic panic would be coming back, and it came back in a different form. It was wearing different clothes. Now it's QAnon, and we saw the pink panic, which is now coming back in the gender critical transphobia in the same kind of way. It's the same arguments, just packaged in a different way. And then the other thing I thought was that the ease in which those movements and conspiracy movements more generally have been so easily overlapping with and then co-opted by the far right as recruiting tools. And I spent a lot of time, as I mentioned on the panel yesterday, in anti-vax Telegram and conspiracy Telegram groups, and seeing those become further and further right as far-right figures recognise that they have a group of people here who are disaffected, who don't trust the mainstream source of information, and therefore can be very easily massaged. If you just start feeding them some of the arguments that they like, they'll start accepting some of the arguments that you want them to accept, and get them onto your topic. So yeah, I think that's for me what I think I missed, and I think we've been missing. I think, Claire, you've given me a good in to my next question, because you say that in Europe you can just watch what we idiots in the English-speaking world are doing and then use that to prepare yourself. So what challenges do we see arising for us in the future? What, in 5 years' time when we have this panel again, what will we be saying we should have been watching for this?
So of course we do like as skeptics get ready, we kind of get that idea of what's going on, but that time frame for us is shorter and shorter every single time because of the social media, because more people are speaking English, because of news translation programs which are much more effective and make sense. So for us, is now we really don't have that much prep time. It's almost like a pop quiz at this point. But I think that our biggest challenge is what has already been mentioned within your question, and that's creating a stronger role for us in partnership with national and international politics and the governments to be able to be seen as a partner or a consulting body on various issues. And I think that is really kind of a big goal that we should try to reach as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, actually, I'll just mention on that the idea of creating a role for skeptics in politics. If anybody is in the Hampshire area of the UK, it's starting to get hyper-local. Danny Chambers, a former speaker here and a fantastic vet and a fantastic skeptic, is running for MP at the next election. So vote for him, and we'll have a skeptic in Parliament who is a scientist and an expert in those areas. So yeah, do that. Noah.
I would say, I don't know if there's a term for this, and if there is, somebody let me know. But I call it black boxophobia. If you look at like the 5G panic here in the UK, right? That's way too many G's to stick in one signal or whatever. The argument was there. The old axiom, right? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from the Illuminati plot to rob us of our free will.
Yeah.
And I think the more that
from Jews.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that the more, technology is not getting any more intuitive. It's not getting any less powerful. And I think the more we move in that direction, the easier it's going to be to fear-monger about whatever new technology they're glomming onto. I think that's where a lot of our efforts are going to go in the next 5 years.
Dana?
No, and picking up on that, we have now a retrofitting movement between populist ideas and conspiracy theories and politics. I don't know, I may be saying something very wrong, but I think in the past that intricate relationship between conspiracy theorists and politicians and political parties and big political parties was not happening. So you have now the Republican Party in the US totally embracing QAnon topics and theories. And that's very, very dangerous because it brings us out of that space that we are all on the same internet, on the same social networks, and each of us are pushing in a direction because now the ideas, the bad ideas we are trying to fight are being brought up, staged up, by very powerful actors as our political parties. And we are seeing that in Portugal also. We have, unfortunately now, extreme right-wing party in Parliament, and they are embracing the whole thing. And they were going to the denialism demonstrations during COVID, and they were being like, you are our guys, we are your guys, and embracing each other. And this will be a big challenge for us because it won't only be different activism groups going against each other and trying to fight in ideas, but we have now political parties involved and real political power, parliamentary power, engaged also in this sort of ideas. And I see that as a danger and a huge challenge ahead.
Yeah, and the points that I had on this were picking up on what you're saying there, this idea of that we'll be fighting against the power. So I think here in the UK, I'm genuinely worried and concerned and suspecting that in a few years' time we're having the conversation in the UK about abortion rights that's going on in the US. I didn't think for a second that would be something that was happening in the UK, but we're starting to see some rises of the anti-abortion movement here. You have people picketing abortion clinics in greater numbers than they ever used to be. We have them emboldened by US money flowing into those groups in order to push their kind of their wedge issues. And I think it's only a matter of time before there's a populist politician who picks up on that as their wedge issue to get sort of power, support, things like that. If Nigel Farage decided tomorrow that he wanted to be anti-abortion, he could sway the entire political window in the UK because of the fear that the far right of the Tories have of him being a challenger.
That has been picked up immediately in Portugal.
Really?
When Roe v. Wade was overturned, next day there were already popping up little pieces of editorials and opinion pieces of very conservative Catholic groups pushing the idea that we need to readdress the subject. It's a law, but we need to get back to it. And
we saw the same thing. It's not just money from the US, but actually there are a lot of the pro-life groups, or they call themselves sometimes pro-family groups, have an international union that is funded by Russian trolls and various from Russian sources. So it's not just the US money gets funded into that, but also the Russian money. So we saw that also, as you were saying, are the cardinal, and all his cronies.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I thought was I can see us dealing with a climate change movement that's moved away from climate denialism into climate doomerism, in the sense that, well, there's nothing we can do now, so we shouldn't. So, we've got exactly the same answers. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, we're now at a point where we can't do anything, so our answers are exactly the same as when we were at a point where we could do something and we said it wasn't happening. Effectively, we don't have to do anything. Or this kind of disingenuous calls for, well, concern over we can't let the solutions be worse than the problem, which is why we give the Rusty Razor Award to the climate denial charity that we did. I think we've got a couple of. I want to take one question, maybe two, before I get to the very last question I'm going to put to the panel. There's a volunteer there. You've got your orange shirt on. You've got your hand up. We'll do you, and then you can pass it to the guy at the back in the white, Ian there with the Marvel top on.
Okay. My question is, we had the observation in our Turkish society. So there's an incredible asymmetry between skeptical or scientific groups and the disseminators. I mean, fake news disseminators or conspiracy theory disseminators. The guy takes it takes just a tweet or an article for a 500,000 follower guy to destroy various works of many scientific or skepticism groups. What can be done about that? I mean, is that constant pressure over the subject, or something else we need to do?
I don't mean to be too defeatist about it, but I don't know that there's anything we can do about that, because we're stuck with the truth, and we can only use the one truth. They can keep testing out new lies until they find one that sticks. We don't have that advantage, so I think that might just be an intractable problem of skepticism. Yeah, I guess when the first answer is there's nothing we can do about it, it's real hard to follow up.
Okay, well, we'll take your question then. This will be the last question, I'm afraid, because we're just about out of time and want to get people over to the main hall. But take your question there.
It's sounding like most of the disinformation is coming from either explicitly or implicitly religious groups. Is there any secular groups that we should be aware of and fighting back against? And does it take a different approach with either a religious group or a secular group?
I think kind of Diana mentioned that when she was speaking about some of the toxic behaviors and beliefs within atheist and rationalist groups. That kind of bizarre, I will use the word bro culture that we've kind of seen in that. So I would say that is definitely a source. There's kind of this pseudo-intellectualism that's going on within these groups where they latch on to personalities who shall not be named. and they just kind of repeat their ideas.
Intellectual dark web.
Yeah, and exactly that. So I would say we kind of have to go look at our own skeptic groups, see what issues we have within our own skeptic groups, because there is people who are unfortunately anti-trans still within skepticism and who are pro-bro culture within skepticism. So yeah, that would be probably.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, and I also think a lot of misinformation comes from groups that are they're not explicitly secular or religious, but they're that's not part of the axis. But many of the same structures of how they spread misinformation, how they come to believe misinformation, are the same sort of structures that you just pick the whole thing up and overlay it onto religion, and it's very similar, and overlay it onto the next bad idea. Like the logic or lack of logic behind it, and the reason that people believe in these things is similar, despite what you switch the nouns out, basically, switch the subjects out. And I think we should be seeing the tools that we use to help people out of these ideas to be very similar, regardless of what the ideas are, really.
And I will just add to that the problem of for-profit groups like fake news websites.
Yeah.
The real fake news websites, they don't care what they publish. They just want clicks. So they will write the more scandalous title and lead, and it doesn't matter if it's true or false, as long as they keep receiving publicity dues from Google or other platforms. And that's a whole different enemy we have to look at, because there's no ideology there, probably. There's no religiosity there. And sometimes one of the cases that came out public, they were just two couple of guys in Macedonia doing a website and earning money. Yeah. So how do you contradict that?
Yeah. I want to give you a last question, and I want to go very, very quick on this because we're out of time. So, are we winning? Yes or no? But you would elaborate
We're at
slightly.
10-7. It's good. We're at the half.
Anyone want to come in on that? Are we winning?
So I think so, yes, and I'll explain why. Yesterday, when I was sitting here, Ian was sitting in front of me, and I did not know Ian yet. I just saw him, but I was sitting next to a mom who has her kid here, and she asked me, "Can I breastfeed?" And I said, "Of course." But I saw Ian tense up before I answered, and I was thinking, "Oh, I am going to fight you if you say something else." I said yes, of course, and then I added, "No one else would dare to say something different here." And he turned around and said, "Yeah, exactly." And that made me so fucking happy. Because, because really...
Can you imagine if that went a different way and you were just calling Ian out at the end of this? Jesus!
But anyway, can you imagine, though, a woman being able to take her kid and breastfeed in the middle of a skeptic conference in the 80s or the 90s? Right? So we are winning because even though the world has gotten sicker, we as a community have gotten much healthier. We have become much more inclusive. Just look at the people here. This is such a different demographic than we started off with. So I think from that point, we are winning.
Well, now I feel like I'm pissing on your answer, but look, as a community, I think we've done really well. I think that QED is a great exemplar of how well we've done as a community. But look, we just got, I don't even know that you could say we got through COVID, but of course, we've just been through all this stuff with COVID. That was a boss fight in the skepticism world, and we were unable to make, axioms like surgical masks weren't decorative this whole time, and don't take horse paste until it's been shown to have some positive effect. We couldn't make that stick, so I think there's a lot of work to be done. It's hard to say we're winning when that's the truth.
Okay, it's 1-1, Diana. Casting votes.
I'll cast my vote as a judge. No. Well, reason and unreason and superstition, they've always been around, and this debate will always be around. So my answer will be the science communicator answer and the trainer answer that we have to teach everyone to say. Don't be afraid to say, "I don't know." And I don't know. That's my most honest answer.